Floridians place a lot of trust in the safety and benefit of immunization.
2 of the shots go into a muscle, and one arm here, and one goes in the back of the arm.
Scientists and researchers say it is trust that's well earned.
Frankly, I think if you look at vaccines and the way that they're tested and the record of safety and the record of efficacy, I think these are the safest, best tested medical products that we put into our body.
Vaccines are continually monitored for safety, and like any medication, they can cause side effects. However, those side effects are usually mild and rarely occur.
In retrospect, over 35 years of watching children get vaccinated, never had a kid who had a really significant adverse effect.
There's risk to anything we do in medicine, but the risk is so minute compared to the benefits, and the risk for the diseases we inoculate against is huge.
Vaccines do have adverse effects. There's no doubt about it. Everything that we do entails some risk. So vaccines can certainly cause you to have fever, and they can hurt and cause some pain in the area. That's about 5% of kids. 95% of kids don't really experience many side effects from just about any of the vaccines.
Despite the excellent safety record of vaccines, for some, the choice to immunize has become a confusing and difficult one. A 2009 national survey of over 1,500 parents by University of Michigan researchers found that 88% of parents followed their pediatrician's recommendations about vaccines, but 54% remained concerned about serious side effects, and 11.5% refused at least one recommended vaccine.
And I grew up in the 50s and 60s and got measles and mumps and chickenpox and German measles. So for me, again, it was very easy to vaccinate my children. But, young parents today not only don't see these diseases because vaccines have been so effective, they didn't even grow up with these diseases. So for them, vaccination becomes a matter of faith. Faith in the government, faith in pharmaceutical companies, faith in the medical establishment. And there's been an erosion, at least in that kind of faith.
While many young parents are dealing with an erosion of faith in the very institutions charged with keeping children safe, vaccine skeptics who use the latest social media tools to spread their anti-vaccine message are bombarding them with misinformation.
I think all parents love their children, and all parents want what's best for their children. What happens sometimes is that some parents get afraid, and fear is a very strong, powerful thing. It is hard for them to interpret information that may be incorrect information, may even be fraudulent information.
The most famous and perhaps most harmful case of fraudulent information involves a hypothesis that linked the measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine to autism.
There was a paper that was published in a British medical journal called The Lancet in 1998 by a British surgeon named Andrew Wakefield, where he proposed that the combination measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine caused autism. Now, he didn't study that hypothesis. He merely reported a case series of 8 children who had recently received the vaccine. Within a month of getting it, had first been noticed to have signs or symptoms of autism.
The first signs of autism typically show up somewhere between 12 and 18 months, and that's around the time that you get many of your vaccines, particularly the MMR. So if 4 million children in the United States are getting their vaccines around that age, and about 40,000 have autism, some of them are going to overlap. And that's where the fear came from, and it was propagated by some bad research.
Despite the questions surrounding his research methods, Wakefield's article proposing a link between the MMR vaccine and autism set off a global public health scare.
Now, people often refer to that as a study, but nothing was studied. It was simply a case series. It has, however, subsequently been studied the way you would have to study it, which is to look at hundreds of thousands of people, children, who did or didn't get that vaccine to see whether the incidence of autism was greater in the vaccinated group. That study has been done 14 different times on several different continents by many investigators, and the results are very clear and consistent and reproducible. MMR vaccine does not cause autism.
In 2010, the Lancet Medical Journal retracted Wakefield's 1998 autism paper. Wakefield's medical license has also been revoked in Great Britain. Wakefield may have been discredited, but when it comes to vaccines and public concern, bad science continues to resonate with fear. Providers have found that scientific fact often has a tough time competing with personal anecdote and the internet.
The other group that sometimes delay or withhold vaccinations are the college-educated, very affluent folks who are reading the internet, who, well-intended, believe that they're doing their own research, but they do not always know the sources of the information. These are not always credible sources who are published in peer-reviewed journals. These folks are not PhDs in virology. They do not study vaccines and their effect on children and on adults.
Oftentimes we hear about events that have occurred following a dose of vaccine, and when you look deeper, the outcome actually occurred before the vaccine dose was given. But it's very important to realize that one event that occurs after a dose of vaccine very well may be a coincidence.
To ensure that vaccines are safe, they are thoroughly studied before and after they are licensed for public use. Beyond that, a strong surveillance system is in place to monitor vaccines being given to the general population.
The Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, which we'll call VAERS, is a passive surveillance system. CDC and FDA relies on providers to report outcomes to us. When a clinician or a provider sees some type of outcome that's of concern to them following a dose of vaccine, we want them to report it to us, whether or not they think it's related to the vaccine.
While the CDC and FDA collect reports on possible outcomes following the dose of a vaccination, the CDC also uses a system called the Vaccine Safety Data Link to both identify and confirm adverse outcomes after immunization. The CDC collaborates with managed health organizations to collect immunization data on more than 9 million people.
All of this information is collected in a large database, and these databases are then linked together and allows the Vaccine Safety Data Link to look at persons that receive vaccine, persons that don't receive the vaccine. And that's a very important distinction because you're going to look at outcomes that occur among persons that both did receive the vaccine and did not. You have to do both sides of that equation to know whether an outcome is caused by a vaccine.
I think as good a net as the government could spread to try to catch information that would tell us there might be a problem with the vaccine.
While immunizations are considered safe and effective, any vaccine can cause side effects, and everyone reacts differently to vaccines. To help explain the benefits and risks of vaccines, the CDC produces documents called Vaccine Information Statements. Federal law requires that the appropriate vaccine information statements be given out before a vaccine is given.
The vaccine information statements are uniform throughout the country. They outline the most common adverse effects and the more serious ones so that parents hopefully will have in hand and have already read the information about what to expect. Most of the time they're localized, redness, tenderness, swelling, that sort of thing, a little fever.
Dr. Paul Offit, a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and a world-renowned vaccine expert, believes passionately in the safety of vaccines. He says the challenge vaccines pose to the immune system is minuscule.
A single bacteria has between 2,000 and 6,000 immunological components. The total number of immunological components in all vaccines combined is about 160 to 170. So it's the notion that you would be overwhelmed by vaccines is just fanciful. And frankly, our species would never survive if the trivial challenge in vaccines were something that was overwhelming. You have a far greater immunological challenge from a single infection with a common cold than you do with all vaccines combined.
To learn more about specific immunizations and vaccine safety, visit the CDC's homepage for vaccines and immunizations at www.cdc.gov/vaccines.